bankers, they set it up in the first place. Most of the big boys at the Royal Institute for International Affairs at the top, including Lord Milner, were bankers. They set up the League of Nations. They set up the United Nations to take over from it. And people should be demanding and protesting in front of the UN for its dismemberment. That's what they should be, because you see, that's to be the world government, where all laws and regulations come from. In fact, most of the laws and regulations you're living under now come from the UN and are put on the desks of what you think is your boss, the Prime Minister or President, and they just sign them into law. Says you're getting that deal done has become the United Nations' highest priority. Remember, this is a private organization, a corporation. It's not a country. It's not any elected parliament or Congress. It's run and pushed and financed by the boys who also own the big foundations that pay the NGO leaders. So the Bonn meeting is seen as a critical step along the path to what the UN calls an ambitious, you bet it is, an effective international response to weather changes, and is intended to culminate at the later gathering in Copenhagen. This is the farce we're going through. It's schizophrenic. As I say, you'll live through this, and even if you're freezing your butt off, they'll still be harping on global warming, until the general population start prattling on about it too. They're the ones that cannot think. They can only repeat what they're given from the mainstream media. It's fantastic. And you know, as you go through this schizophrenia, you'll see all kinds of stupid, crazy, mad laws getting rammed down your throat. Because the ones at the top, technically, although they understand where they're going, they know that we'll go through this period of chaos. Lenin talked about it. He said the West eventually, towards the end of the millennium into the new, he said we'll go through a period where there are so many government bureaucracies making laws, they'll be fighting with each other, stepping over into each other's territory until everything is simply mad. The Washington Post, I thought this was a joke at first, the Washington Post, March 26, Michael Arrington at TechCrunch.com. The California legislature is considering regulating the color of cars and reflectivity of paint to reduce the energy requirements to cool them. A presentation on the proposed legislation by the California Air Resources Board is below. The problem isn't the color per se, but the reflectivity of the paint overall, and dark colors just don't reflect well, so they're likely out. Jet black remains an issue. Back with more after these messages.
You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, because you can handle the truth.
I'm Alan Watt for Cutting Through the Matrix and discussing the beginnings of the madness as they were told what to think, how to think, and actually believe the farces they hand us seriously, but to be very serious when we're questioned about our beliefs on things. Do you believe in global warming? You'll be sent off to be reconditioned if you don't. This is all coming by these people who believe they have the right to modify our behavior completely from birth to the grave. They call it, tongue-in-cheek, continuous education, as they upgrade you step by step through your entire life, like a computer being programmed. Updates, and you must forget the previous updates when the new ones totally contradict the last updates. That's what Orwell talked about. People should read 1984. It used to be taught in school. They should read it in school to try and prevent this from occurring in reality. But now they're all onto other things, and they're throwing history down the memory hole. I mentioned already about Sarkozy doesn't believe that peoples have the right to vote on such tremendous things of import, such as the various treaties for the Economic Union of Europe. But there's Europarl, a great group who've put up different videos from the EU Parliament on debates, and you'll hear Sarkozy saying this in his own words. I'll put the link up at the end of the show. You should go and listen to this and watch the charades that they go through. I also put up a link for the Prime Minister of Britain, Mr. Brown, who calls for the US and Europe in the Parliament of Europe. He makes a speech. You can watch it. He says the US and Europe will lead the way for global governments. See it for yourselves. Did you know that's why you vote these people in? Did you know that's why you voted Obama in, for global government? Did you know that? Did he mention that in any of his speeches? No, they never do. Because they're liars, you see. They're liars. They're born liars. That's why psychopaths are employed to be prime ministers and presidents. They don't bat an eyelid. You'll see Brown sitting there with a big smirk on his face when the reality of what he did when he was the Chancellor of the Exchequer and pretty well sink the economy and make every mistake you could imagine, with this big grin on his face as he pushes for the next step of taking more wealth from everyone else, every other country, including Britain, and scattering it across the planet during this depression. Nothing phases these psychopaths, but their bosses are still their bosses. And we don't vote their bosses in, these private organizations that own the banks and they own the foundations. They run under the guise of charities. Charities are now telling us what to do, how to behave, what to drive, or even drive at all. All to save the world, mind you. Where's democracy? Eh? We don't have it. We never did have it. The US was infiltrated an awful long time ago by the same system that already ruled Britain from the city of London. President Wilson was the first one to say that the US was a democracy. And his manager was Mandel House, who was responsible to Lord Grey, the go-between for the Royal Institute for International Affairs in England and London. They forget the US was supposed to be a republic with a fixed constitution. To stop this from happening, no one wants to discuss that. In fact, no politician takes it seriously, even though they've all committed treason. Jefferson, who certainly knew the system, and he knew the big boys, and then he also knew the agenda in his own day, because he was accused at the time of joining the same clubs that Benjamin Franklin joined in France. And he said, when you see an agenda being continued between the changes of the houses in Congress from one party to the next every 4 or 5 years, when you see the same agenda continue, you will know you are under tyranny. And regardless of the parties and the fronts who go in there, they're all signing the same global agendas and United Nations agendas, one after the other. Because, you see, you are under tyranny. Governments that prepare for 20 years for internal strife mean that they're going to create the problems to bring on that internal strife, which also tells you that everything that happened to do with the takedown, financial, etc., was planned that way a long time ago. Logic, logic, logic.